This lecture is being brought to you in part by the generous gifts of these sponsors.
Thank you, folks. Thanks for coming out tonight, and appreciate that nice opening. I don't know if I can live up to all that, Ken. I appreciate it. And isn't this a great venue, IHMC? I mean, we have it in Ocala where we live, and we go see it there, and it's stunning, isn't it? Is my wife in the audience? Could she stand up and take? Yeah. Would you stand up and just take a hand clap while I'm fixing the computer here for a second? I've often heard that behind every great man is a great woman. I think it's beside every great man. Yeah? It's true? Okay. So you see some film clips tonight. You guys are in class, and I'm going to test you when we're done to see how you do. We are not going to do a PowerPoint. I'm a visual kind of guy, so we're going to go through and visually look at how we make wildlife films. And what we're going to do is look at some of the different ways that we do that. Before we start, I want to tell you a short story because we have this notion from outside the business that what we do is live a vacation. And the last camp we went to, we had 1,900 pounds of gear. They brought in a landing craft with more gear, and we literally broadcasted live to England in 3 seconds. Can you imagine how much gear it took to do that? $4.7 million worth of stuff in 2 different locations. I was just at one of the locations. So it's not a picnic. It's a lot of work. We love it. But it's a humbling experience. And one of my favorite humbling experiences was flying around with some guys who are really great pilots, but they're counting fish. We're working on a film years back called Seasons of the Salmon for National Geographic. And one of the things that they do that's remarkable is they stand an airplane on a wing and fly up a creek. While they're doing that, there's a guy who's the head of the fisheries who's literally counting salmon on a clicker in his hand. All right, we're shooting movie film at this time, so you didn't really have to shoot a lot of that to get the shot. And movie film's $400 every 11 minutes. So after the second time, when the gas didn't quite power the engine anymore and he had to flip it over and restart before we hit the trees, say, guys, is there another place we can stop and maybe I can film a few salmon while y'all are doing the rest of the 90-mile-long lake? They thought it was a good idea to get rid of me as well. So they found a place out in the middle of nowhere. And we were already there. We're 300 miles from the nearest road where we live in the summer. And so they dropped by on a little strip out in the middle of nowhere and just a great, beautiful spot full of salmon. It was a freshwater spring that probably had 5,000 fish in it. And if you know sockeye salmon, you know they turn bright red in the summer and a green head, just a distinctive looking fish. And here was air clear water, sunny day, this beautiful sight, and they dropped me off. I have no gun. I don't even have a long lens because I was just going to shoot inside the plane. So I have a little short, stubby wide-angle lens and one other lens. If you know Geographic, you know that they live by what we call the Walmart code in my world. That's WMT. That's wide, medium, and tight. You are going to get in every sequence at least an eyeball shot or a very close-up shot. And that's one of their signature ways of making a film. Remember, you're going to be tested on this later. All right, so wide, medium, and tight. It's very easy to remember. But when you're making your own home movies and things like that, or making films for friends, or if there's students in here that are thinking about making films or watching on YouTube, this is a huge plus. You always have to have an establishing shot saying where you are, a medium shot that tells a little bit more about the situation, and something that really gets graphic. Well, as I was watching this, I didn't see anything like that except a beautiful wide scene. I took that. And then I saw a salmon that had the perfect imprint of a bear's nose in its back. A bear had come down and bit the hump on a sockeye and bit the entire chunk out, and you could see his backbone sticking up. And he's still swimming, and typical male still trying to mate, right? You guys have had to put up with it for years, I know. So I got in a position, got part of the shot, got enough of it, but I couldn't get the close-up. So what's going to happen is I'm going to get weighed out in this very, very cold water, and my pants are going to be wet for hours while I'm waiting for these guys. So I just hung them up on a tree and went out there. And I'm filming, bent over, of course, in an obnoxious posture, I'm sure. And finally, after 15 or 20 minutes, he came in, the male came in very close, just like he meted my camera here, and I got it. And I got a really cool couple of different angles and backlit and a little sun busting through there. Right about here, I hear some rustle in the bushes behind me. It's like out of a B movie. You just know, oh no, what am I thinking? I'm standing next to a fish that's already been bitten in half by a bear, practically. And I've been in bear country for 30 years. It's not a new item in my menu. So I just going to turn around real slow. And I'm thinking as I'm turning around, this is going to be one of the worst headlines ever. You know, man killed with bear behind, or what? I mean, you know, it's just not, you know, geographic man and found in his skivvies. I don't know what it was going to be, but it was not going to be good. And I turn around, and if you know Alaska at all, you know there's 23 different groups of people there as far as languages. They're one of the most iconic groups is the Athabascans. Athabascans may say a paragraph a month if they're busy. They don't talk a lot. And they are, as well as being extremely well edited, they are direct and love to kill you just with a couple of words. So we turn around, and here is an Athabascan, and he has a flannel shirt on and a 30-30 in his hand, and he's looking at me, and he says, "What are you doing?" So in 3 little words, he has me. I have to explain myself, and I know it's going to take more than a sentence, so he's not going to like this. So I told him I'm filming salmon, and he said, "In your underwear?" So, you know, after 2 sentences, you're going, okay, here we go. Well, the plane's coming in, and I didn't want to get my pants wet, and they're on the tree right there. And so he starts walking away. Too many words in a row. It's like a Walmart of words. So as he starts walking away, he goes, I said, "Don't do that, you know, Clint Eastwood thing where you ask me 2 questions and walk off. Where are you going?" I have a lot of Athabascan friends. He goes, "Well, I'm going to hunt moose with my clothes on." Real acidic like that. And folks, you obviously saw what we just did there. We do storytelling, right? And that's what we do to make films. We get introduced a lot as geographic photographers. What we do are making wildlife films, and there's a real weird group of wildlife films. And it's not really commonly talked about among folks that aren't doing the job. It's called a blue chip film. Anybody know about blue chip films? All right. Well, a blue chip film is simply a natural history film that has either no people or very, very few people in it. So it's not, a scientist is not taking you through the story. There's not a human character helping you all the way through the story. It's being told just by the wildlife and the narrator that's helping them out. It's not easy. Can you imagine what you're expecting to see? You've just seen $1 million car commercial before you flip over to Geographic, right? And they spent $3 million, and we're going to have $1 million or $500,000 for a 3-year project. It's way different than anything you can imagine as you're going out there. You're going, all right, I've been a producer and a director there. I've written the soundtracks. I'm sitting there at 3 o'clock in the morning and go, how do I do this? You know, I mean, the storyline's laid out, and you sold it, and you did all this, and now you stepped in it, and you've got to produce. So it's very exciting. It's got, in some ways, easier now, and some ways more difficult. With digital and video and all the things that we have. We have better tools than we've ever had. And I'm just going to bring this up before we go on. And I'm not, I don't own the company. But what we've been doing is using some amazing new cameras. And this is called a RED camera. And it's made in the United States. And it's an amazing camera. And what it does is there was a fellow who ran a sunglass company and owned it and thought, my goodness, what if I just shot digital still pictures at 24 frames a second? Wouldn't I have a movie camera? And he was absolutely right. So I was lucky enough to get the first batch of 100 they made about 8 or 10 years ago. And James Cameron got 50 of them. I got 1. But Geographic got 1. And we used it on grizzly bears. And I had a fight, maybe Richard, maybe you to me, right? And I'm sitting on the ground with 3 buddies. And one of them is a tech for the company, because the camera is so new, when you turned it on, it took 20 seconds to load up, or 15 seconds to load up. I'm watching this fight going. Some of the fights are only 15 seconds long. They're very, very fast. This is not going to work. But finally it cranked up, and these guys ended up fighting and fighting and fighting. So we were sitting on the ground level, open field, and 2 bears just going at it. And you could literally see chunks of hair flying out. Well, as I'm shooting, I'm thinking, did you see some of the still pictures earlier? There's this giant camera and my face behind it like that. That thing, that's the camera we had. That's an $85,000 lens. The detail is stupid good. It's wonderful, but it's heavy. You can't move around a lot. So I said, I can't get a close-up from here. It's just not going to work. And this lens only goes to 290. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. And he said, don't worry, you already have it. I said, what do you mean? He said, you're shooting at 5,000 lines of resolution for a show that only has 1,000 lines of resolution. So you can literally zoom in on that picture for TV after the thing's shot when you're done. So that's one of the things this can do. And the other thing it can do is cache information. So I often shoot after something's happened. I had 2 bucks fighting in front of me the other day, just going at it. And buck fights are really, really fast, so it's hard to follow it. And when it got done, it was 15 seconds to hit the button. I had the last 20 seconds of that fight. And so I didn't waste any film, didn't waste any hard drives. And this it can shoot a terabyte a day. So you can load up a bunch of hard drives. Anyway, so red cameras are one of the new stables for guys like us, and we can shoot in low light and high light and just do all kinds of things. It has 14 stops of range. So if you're off a little bit, you're still okay. Remember slides? If you're off 1/3 of a stop, the slide was no good. Some of the pictures you saw earlier were from slides. So that's an old but wonderful technique, but the new way is wonderful. The only problem now is when we got done at the end of the day in the old days, it was movie film. You couldn't shoot super late. It was too dark, and you were done. You closed everything up, and you went night-night. In Alaska, the sun comes up at 4:30, goes down at 11:30. You can read a newspaper at 12. This thing can kick it up and go. So we're crawling back into camp around 11:30 and 12 and eating a little bit of dinner, go to bed, and there's a guy just running all night long, downloading all you shot, all day long. So it's a process, but it's wonderful. So the storytelling now has changed somewhat because we can do amazing things. Animals, can you think about an animal like an alligator? I've done tons of alligator films, underwater, above water, been to Cuba and got Cuban crocodiles. But when is he going to do anything? You can sit there and watch him, and the old saying about crocs is, you know when you're watching him, he's watching you. And they know more about you than you know about them. Because he's watching all your moves, he's seeing what you're doing. You're just going, oh, that's another croc laying by the swamp there or whatever, and he's looking at your body language, say, he might just come down to the water later. I'm going to sit right in here. Done that in Africa. We sat in one place, fished for tiger fish in the morning, went on, did our filming, came back. The next day, my buddy was from Africa. He said, watch where you're standing. I said, okay. So that croc, that 13, 14-foot Nile croc, had halved the distance. The next day, he disappeared. And he said, just look down at your feet. We're looking right down in there. And I'm somebody who wrestled gators and caught gators in the wild many, many times. The croc had just an eye and part of a nose were all we could see in the cane. So they're remarkable. And so when you're filming, what we do is, a lot of people look at you and go, well, why should he get a chance to go do what he's doing? And well, part of my whole life has been living out in the woods and watching behavior. So I am not a scientist. I'm not a zoologist or biologist or any of these things. I'm actually a Presbyterian, and I'm not even very good at that. So I apologize for one of the few people that stands up here and who's not a scientist, but we do have kind of a collision of art and science when we do our work. A lot of the products are very science-based, how they come up with these cameras and some of the things we can do there, but also the behaviors and things fit very well into what we learn about in a lot of the biology and wildlife management. When you do everyday storytelling, what you do, you go out and you see something and you go, well, you come back and someone says, where'd you go? What'd you do? What'd you see, right? That's storytelling. So when we do our films, we lay out first some kind of storyline, and how do we sell that to Geographic, or how do we even get in the door? So what we found out a long time ago is that you need to bring in something that they may have seen before, but you did it better than anybody else did it. Or it's something so new that nobody's ever seen it before. So to make that, we call that a sizzle reel. So now you're in on the loop. This is called a sizzle reel. And now you can actually put a sizzle reel online, and if you know the right people, they may even get to see it at Geographic or at BBC or Discovery from another source, from a friend. So this particular sizzle reel I'm getting ready to show you was aimed at the University of Florida. I'm sorry, FSU fans. My sister and brother both went to FSU. I apologize, but we live 30 miles from Gainesville, and they had a nasty little chomp video that had been up there for 22 years, because I shot the first part of it way back. And it was shot on movie film. They're trying to show it on a stretch screen, and it was horrible. Every time I went, I was just wincing and wincing, and I didn't know who the new people were in the visual. So we made a sizzle reel. We sent it in, and now there's a new one there. If you go to watch it, it's all shot in 6K, and it looks really good on a big screen, and I don't have to wince anymore. But now we just have to wince when the Gators lose all the time. So I'm going to play you a little piece of that little sizzle reel. It's only a minute long, and our friend's going to grab the lights there, and we're going to take a look at alligators. And this was all filmed within 45 minutes of my house, so don't come too close to our house. And as far as the music, we can't afford anybody else, so we write our own. And this is a friend of mine, Tracy Collins, and I cranking out some music. trying to give a little mystery when you start out. You got to crank the music a little bit. There you go. Thank you. Now imagine that 150 feet long, you know, when you're running outside. All right, so how do we do that? Anybody know? A lot of the behavior that you see in films and such, we are all suspicious of. How did they get that? Did they fake that? Did they do this? There is places and reasons why we do have to get extra close to animals, and it's not legal. And in the case of alligators, I can't change the habits of a gator in the wild. I can actually be in trouble for doing what we used to do as kids was roll out of a canoe on one at night when we were mad at our parents and grab an alligator and just go crazy and have fun. Didn't have to drink, you know, just go do that. You can't do that anymore. That's naughty behavior and too PC for that anymore. But so in certain cases, you'll see what we call ECUs. That's an extreme close-up, which is the other thing that now Geographic's demanding, where you have just the eye of something. But most of that was filmed in state parks, and I made deals with them that I could go in early and they could use the footage when we got done. And so it was shot in real-life situations where you got a lot of things. Just the dropping out, and some of those extreme close-ups were shot at the alligator farm in St. Augustine. Happy to tell you the truth, but all the rest of that, a lot of the rest of it was in getting up at dawn, waiting in the right place, and 3 days later you got it, you know, or whatever. One of them we caught an alligator when no one was around and put a GoPro on him and let him run underneath the vine down there, and caught him again, took the GoPro off and let him go. So don't lend me your GoPros. All right, guys, when we're making a film, we need a character. I met one over here, Richard, when I first came in. He's already, you know, he's talking about swapping out with me and just doing the talk like he was me. I had enough notes up here, he could probably do that. Apologize for not letting you. But when we do films, you don't have necessarily a human being in the film as a blue chip specialist now that you are. And so what we need is a character in the film. And you've seen this in starting back with Jane Goodall, and there'd be one chimp that everybody knew Frodo, or everybody knew this particular animal. And so they still use that technique in many films. And so what we end up doing in a lot of cases is trying to find 2 or 3 of those when we start filming. We've had our character be eaten before. We were following 2 moose calves and the mom, and we were 20 days into a film shoot, and luckily we'd been following another animal, and we're able to get some other footage with him. But they were actually attacked by a boar in downtown Anchorage in the back of the EPA attorney's house for Anchorage. She was out of town, luckily for her, and I got up on a roof and filmed the bear the next afternoon coming back in to feed on those carcasses. So what's going on in Alaska is about 85% of the moose calves are being killed by grizzly bears. There's that many bears around. And it's extremely, well, it's rough if you've been filming them for 20 days and you're buddies, you know, and hanging out with them. We got to the point, a lot of people, when we come to these things, bring a lot of baggage with us. We think, well, moose and hippos and all these things, they're extraordinarily dangerous. They are, but you learn to reason and work with a thoroughbred horse, and they're extremely dangerous. A lot of people hurt every year by a thoroughbred horse. So you're watching body behavior, and we were literally getting in the daybed with the cow and the calves and hanging out with her. Every morning they go to, after about 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, they're laying in a daybed just cruising. So we would go in and sit with them and talk to them like, your outfit, is that Cabela's? Where'd you get that? It looks really nice on you. It's a little thick for this time of year, isn't it? And so that kind of thing. The upshot of it is then you get natural behavior. When you watch from outside and you see photographers, well, they're kind of doing the same they do with Hollywood stars, don't they? They run in on them and try to shoot something and take pictures. That's not how we work with wildlife at all. My wife can tell you, because morning's up, out, gone. and come back and go back every day. And I spent 9 years on a group of deer that's on 4,000 acres. Now I can sit by my truck outside on a little stool, and they walk all around me, do everything they're going to do. I go to the trees that I know they're going to feed on. I know where they've been going to fight and mating and all these things. And so we made a film for PBS Nature called The Private Life of Deer. And it is private. It took about 25 or 30 days before they'd put up with me. And one day she was with me, and big old buck just walked around. For Florida, it's probably a 180 or 190 as far as the rack size. I've got the fallen off points and have cued it out, and it's pretty good. Walked all around me, 25 yards out, and before then, at 100 yards, they're taking off 150 yards. They get hunted on this property, and it's a cattle ranch. But the cattle rancher was nice. You just go anytime you want, and boom, boom, boom. And so after a while, we ended up being able to do all kinds of things with these deer. So it's a totally different outlook than what you would think. Blinds don't work for us with a movie camera because I'm tracking. So if an Osceola turkey's looking at me, he sees it right away. Or a bald eagle, they'll pick you up right away. With a still camera, you can do it because you're not moving the camera so much. So we need open areas so they can watch us. So we do one thing very important for everyone in business. Is anybody in business for themselves here? Yeah, okay, good, me too. I'm in business to stay in business. So I'm going to give you one of my best tricks. It's location, 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 right? So if I'm going to get interaction with a lot of animals, I'm going to get a lot of animals in one place. I mean, if you've heard of bears being, big in Alaska in certain areas, there are places we see 50 to 70 brown bears or grizzly bears in one day. That's where I'm going, because now I'm going to get interaction from one bear to another. I'm going to get all kinds of traveling because they're going to be moving from one group to the other. They don't always get along. There's going to be a lot of feeding going on. And so this is a great, great place to start out. So our location's a super part. So we're finding our characters and our location and all these different things, hopefully in one spot. And the thing we have to be careful of when we promise things to Geographic and other is that you can actually do it. And in the case of bears, you can't. A bear will walk off during the night and walk 40 miles in a night. Next day, 40 miles away. They put collars on them. I have friends who are biologists. My wife works for the Fish and Game Department, and one of them went 42 miles over 2 mountain ranges in one 24-hour period. So we'll go in and tell them that, and they'll go, yeah, but we still want to do it anyway. So you'll see bears on TV once in a while in different shows. I'm not saying Geographic, but anywhere where they're trying to do that with certain species, and you're going, that doesn't look exactly like. Penguins, no problem. They all look the same. But when you develop a character, be careful that you can actually follow that animal, because it's not always easy to do. So any of you watching at home, if you're building a show for Geographic, let's take another look at a little bit more about what we're doing. There's another interesting thing in filmmaking now. Let's don't do that all over again. Yeah, we had Wagnerian redneck music. How was that? It was kind of interesting, huh? I'll show you something real quick. We'll go to the end of this. And this is, we're talking about how we do species and stuff. What we're doing here, don't try this at home, but basically what is this time, by being with them all this time, what you get to do is have a relationship with that animal that is, he trusts you, and you can't completely trust anything, but this is just how some of this goes. You had a drop time, so you have to watch it. You lose your hat if you don't. And this camera, just for a second, you see this odd lens on the front? This is called an Innovision lens. That little lens, that little stick right there is now $15,000. But what it does is from here to here is waterproof all the way down. Right. And so you can be underneath a moose dripping water on you. You can take it down to an alligator in the water, and you're above water and out of the water. And this part of it is 5 millimeters. So it's macro, wide angle. So I can come in on you on your eye, and the people in the back of the room will still be in focus somewhat. Amazing. So when you go, how did they do that? I'm gospel telling you, you can't do it unless you have what we're using. Your cell phone is not going to do it. Do not get yourself killed over a shot because you're trying to get the same thing we got with equipment that was made for it. And those lenses can be changed to an 18 mil to different lenses on the front, but it's all waterproof. And it's got O-rings in it and the whole 9 yards. Clunky to use, but those shots ended up in the film for moose, Titans of the North, if you see that one on National Geographic. And it has a whole life history on moose, and got them in Sweden and other countries as well. But we used some of the best equipment of the time. The way things are going now, a lot of us rent or lease, because that camera, within 2 years, we did another one with Alec Baldwin doing the narration on a bear film, and we used a whole different set of cameras. That's how fast it's changing. So that may be a $100,000 camera one year, and a couple of years later you got it. So we like Reds, they upgrade the camera. You just put in another, upgrade, and it gets better and more gooder. And that's the way to do it for us. And so we've been real happy with that. But you see the difference in something like that and the shot that you might get with just a regular camera or a still camera. It's remarkably different.
If you're gonna shoot grizzly bears, you need a really big lens. So we're getting ready to go shoot grizzly bears with a really big lens. This is incredible.
And what that little scene was about was when we get done with films, like you do it, you probably saw them on Planet Earth and some of the other films, is we use ourselves as character to help the film along. And we'll talk a little bit about how we did different things. That particular camera shoots 5,000 frames in 1 second. And so if you ever saw the bear at the top of the falls catching the fish, and I'll show you that in a minute, a new way we just shot it for National Geographic, I shot that with a camera that had a cache of 20 seconds. So I'm sitting there watching that happen, and the bear catches the fish just the way we want it, and you hit the shot after it happened. And it recorded the last 20 seconds. It's a wonderful way to do it, because if you're shooting 5,000 frames a second, what does your hard drive look like? Oh my gosh. You have to even edit in the camera before you can shoot again. The shot is so huge, just to save it, it takes forever. So there's some clunky things to some of the new items. They work, but while that was happening, after that happened, 2 bears broke out in a fight, and I couldn't film it because I was working on the other shot. Went to 130 countries for 6 years, so it was okay. And they don't know what you missed. What we tell young interns, they don't. If you didn't get it, don't almost get it. Get it or don't, but don't almost get it. This is where we were talking about using the red for the first time, and you can see the bears just walking around. I've just got a camera on my head, a GoPro on your head. You can see how it is in these open pastures. And what's going on there is we've learned the behavior of these guys, these little characters, and what they're doing is after being in hibernation and doing all this, they'll come out and just eat grass for almost a month. And I went there several years in the 80s before I went, I wonder what this tastes like. I started eating it and I went, oh my gosh, this is great. It was fabulous. It's better than celery. You're just sitting out in the grass. And I guess I'm supposed to be shooting, I guess. I'll be back to work here. So they have found sources, and those sources change. As the summer goes along, that grass will change acidity, and they won't eat it anymore. They'll eat lupin. Anybody know lupin flower, beautiful flower out west? They have it in Alaska. They have an Arctic lupin. And they'll eat lupin roots just a couple weeks, and then it's done. That's it, the rest of the summer. So guess what? When we're watching behavior on these things, the mom comes right in with the babies, and the noses of the little ones are right by her face. What the heck's going on here? Well, with a big old lens, I can watch them. They're breathing. They're sniffing what she's eating, because they want to know when and how to eat whatever it is they're eating. And so this behavior stuff is often not captured by biologists first. Sometimes we'll show it to them and they'll go, oh yeah, because they don't have a lens that's the size of New Jersey, right? So a lot of this behavior, especially the alligators underwater, we've come up on our own. So our goal when we're making a film like this is to build our character, but our character is going to tell him a lot about himself. I don't know your name, sir. What's your name?
Joe.
All right, so Joe, if we were making a story about Joe, what would we do? We'd start off in the sense of making a film about him. We did one on salmon, and we'll just say Joe is one of our salmon. Sorry, bud. You like salmon okay?
I do.
Oh, good news. That's good news. So on the salmon, what we did was we took a fiber optic lens way back. This is in the, 90s sometimes. Doesn't seem long to us, does it? That's not bad. Mid-90s. And we took a fiber optic lens. We borrowed it from the Mayo Clinic. I'm not sure they knew it was gone. And we were in downtown Minneapolis, and we went to a really beautiful setup for the flying fruit that you used to see on Kellogg's and all that stuff, and you'd see all the stuff flying. They had made this amazing setup. So we wanted to make somebody feel something about Joe the salmon. And when you're talking about a fish, it's kind of hard. You feel bad when they get eaten by the bear or whatever, but you're going, okay, how do you really make something feel something and give him character in the fish world? So what we ended up doing was take this fiber optic lens, and we could not get inside the salmon egg when it hadn't hatched yet. They have a gas permeable outside. We had a friend ship in ones that were at a hatchery that they were going to throw away. So we're not killing wild salmon. These were from a hatchery that was in South Dakota. And we put them on a little piece of Play-Doh and took a piece of this fiber optic lens's 1.8 millimeter lens. For half a day, we worked, could not figure out how to do it. Then we took a hatched one, laid it up there, and you could lay it right next to him, and you could see his heart. So we have full-frame heart shots, boom, 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 of an animal that's only 5 millimeters at this point, and now we're getting inside and seeing that, and now you feel something. So my greatest honor was not a couple of statues you got in front of people you didn't know in New York, was to go to play this for Yupik native folks or for Athabascans, and they'll cry. I mean, this is the fish that's helped their whole civilization for thousands of years, and it means something to them. So they watch and go, okay, I did it, I got it right. You know, some of them you don't. Some of them we got done and go, oh man, I'm glad I didn't put my name on that one. You know, so. All right, so I'm gonna just take you a little quick thing here. Now, so when we've got our sizzle reel done.
My parents were.
And so we have to, oh goodness, that's my mom. She's in Jacksonville right now, so she doesn't know about all this. All right, before I skip on, I want to show you what we did with the bears. Now, we've seen the bears a million times at the falls, right? And so this summer we took the red camera and did it a whole different way. And so just a real quick little musical thing. Once you've got your sizzle reel, the other thing you want to do is find 2 or 3 hero shots for your show. And what I found is when I make my first reel to show them what the story is, I got my sizzle reel, they said, okay, this guy can shoot. We know he knows how to put together, or this gal, there's some great ladies out there shooting right now. And so they're actually probably working and making money while I'm here, so they're doing better than I am. But nonetheless, the way you're going to go on the next part of your tour there with Geographic or somebody else is to pile up 3 or 4 what we call AAA shots. They're a shot where you go, oh man, that just makes the whole show. You already have that when you step in to pitch your show idea. Well, it makes it a whole lot easier. They're not worried about their $500,000 going down the tubes because you can't get the shots that they think that you need to have to make the show finished. So if you're trying to sell this, you come in with the shots that are really, going to help make the whole thing a polished item. And in this case, we're just going to say that these are something like that. And this is taking a shot that's been done before. And what we did was, my friend and I are goofy, and we're not really supervised well. So on some of the fishing shows, like Walker's Cay Chronicles and stuff, we would slip in Japanese opera music. We would do whatever we wanted until someone said no. So this actually came from one of those TV shows, and I just put it on top of this. And this is what we call raw files. The guys here are shooting red cameras as well. And when you first get it right out of the camera, this is what it looks like. I haven't treated it. We haven't done anything like we'll do, and I'll show you some of the finished treated pictures after a while. But we shoot things what we call flat. So it's not over the top, and it's kind of no contrast, kind of flat looking. So forgive me for that, but I wanted you to see what it looks like before you actually do a treatment to a film. And we're going to do a treatment to a film in a little bit, and you'll see. But anyway, so here he is. He's getting ready to catch his fish. And remember, the salmon's gone 10,000 miles, and now this, right? So we got our wide and our mediums and our tights in there, didn't we? All right, so you stepped in with a crucial story element. You walked in there and go, here's how we're going to make this film and how we're going to do something with it. The other thing you have to identify when you're making films is what's your market? Who's that going to be? Is it a redneck Bubba with a fancy hairdo sitting out by his old pickup truck, or what are we doing here? Who's this for? And is it this group right here? And how are we going to taper our show so that it reaches our market? So once you have your crucial elements of your show and you're trying to really make the viewer care about what it is, you need to identify it who your client is. And your client is, it could be all of America, it could be adults, it could be any group of people. So you have to kind of go with that a little bit. There are new things on the horizon, and they have done that. They have located their group, and what they did was they made a special app. Right, it's got two P's, so you got one, right? And this special app is unique. It's called, there it is, Curiosity Stream. Okay, and what Curiosity Stream has done we have people all over the country that are homeschooling. They have a lot of folks who are like ourselves, that we've seen every Netflix cop show. Okay, we're done. This is nothing but learning. It has all kinds of Nova shows. It has PBS Nature. It has all these things in one place. $3 a month, $4 a month, whatever it is. And so we started making some films from there, and their market was different. So I'm going to show you a little clip. I won't show you the whole thing. You have to go on and watch it yourself, but you'll get an idea. And I've got a little show on there, little 5 little shorts on there. They're 9-10 minutes long. You don't want to watch an hour show anymore. You can just watch 8 or 9 minutes, and you'll learn something. There'll be new things in there that you didn't know. And we take a lot of time to shoot them. And so the upshot of this is they have to tell you a little bit about the folks who did it. So I got to have some embarrassing me time there first. I apologize.
My parents were world-class musicians. I, on the other hand, wanted to wrestle alligators and milk rattlesnakes. Eventually, this led me down the road to making wildlife films about the animals I love.
Imagine biking with a $250,000 camera on your back.
You believe they let me have that? That's crazy. They're nuts.
Surrounded by bears. We got as close as we could get.
So making wildlife films has been a passion for me for the last 30 years. I look forward to taking you to some of the great places to see some of the best wildlife in North America.
Let me stop just a second first. That's Silver Springs, if you don't know, if you haven't been there. That cave is 85 feet long, just a gorgeous, and we go all over the world looking at stuff. You stop back in our backyard. This is all, what I did was present this to them as if we're going to Africa with the music, but we're actually just in Central Florida. So proud of our backyard. Let's go. That's inside the cave at Silver Springs. They don't allow you to dive in there anymore, but we got lucky at the time. Don't know, there's a wild monkey population around Silver Springs, has been for about 40 years now. This is called a head slap, very hard to catch in the wild. They do it facing shore, and they do it to announce where they are. And they don't want to do it for just a split second, and it's done. Wood ibis, wood storks, are back. They're doing great. And of course, ibis as well. This gal's teaching her kids how to fly. Look down below, the little guy's trying to pick it up. Not doing so good just yet. He needs to wait another week. This is called a water dance. Kent Vliet, the University of Florida, is the first guy to call it that and figure it all out. It's an amazing event in alligator's life. Those are snook in Homosassa Springs. That's my third grade teacher. So we have a Canadian photographer, and he needs a little help, a little coaching there. So a manatee came in and helped him get these shots. So you know there are people coming from all over the world. There's 3 BBC crews in Florida this next 3 months, 2 of which are doing nothing but manatees. That's how big a deal it is. And we have them, in Silver Springs now. We have them in several other places they didn't used to be. They're starting to come back. White-tailed deer are the same number, or greater numbers than when the Pilgrims are here. They're coming back great all over the country. So these little musical pieces like this, the only thing we're missing at this point is what I started ducking in, the narration, right? So the other thing we've got to do when we're making our viewer care about this is the writing part. So I'm going to get to this one in just a second. But writing-wise, there's a number of different ways of doing things. This next one is literally the wrong way to do it, and we did it on purpose that way. The idea was to do a film without having a voice of God narrator, and that was me. I'm definitely not the voice of God. I'm Presbyterian, for crying out loud. I can barely hear him from here. So the upshot of it is that the fellow I was working with was Steve Burns. Steve has probably done, 1988, I met him first, or 89 at National Geographic. That's how long he's been making films and overseeing natural history films for them. And he started a company and worked on this curiosity stream. He said, hey, let's just have you talk about it like it's your backyard. I'm tired of somebody from England telling me about an alligator. He doesn't know anything about it, and I don't believe he knows anything about it. Just be yourself and tell us about it. So that's what we did. So there's places in here where I go, why did I say that? But he wanted a stream of conscious, just do it that way. But what we're using to tell this story is crazy technology, and it's almost as interesting as some of the stuff's going on here at the Robotics Center here. One of the things is a camera that shoots 30, 40 miles away. This one's shooting now 2 miles from these tracks. Let me back that shot up just a little bit. But we're literally, the first shot, you'll see right here behind us, since we're doing a class, that's 1.5 miles, 2 miles away. And the camera costs $500,000, so if y'all want to pitch in and help me get another one, I need a refresher. We rent them, obviously. We take them out to remote areas. That's hard enough just to get it out there. And we've used the gentleman who did Planet Earth. His name is Richard Burton, if you didn't know that. That was a cameraman who did all those great things on the first aerials of Planet Earth. And he's from LA, and he came up and we did some work with him. And there's a couple other very talented guys in Alaska that I love to give everybody their credit. Daniel Zatz is the other guy. They both are credible with this unit. Know copters very, very well, and they know how to shoot them. So they're going to take you into and make the viewer care about a brown bear. And the way we're doing it is by thinking, wow, I mean, this guy's walking across a snowfield after 7 months or 5 months or 6 months sleeping. They don't even truly hibernate. They can get up in the middle of winter and walk around. If you look at a true hibernator, they go into just a coma and they're out. Bears don't do that. They'll get up and go out and go back and go out and go back. They don't defecate for 5 months. It's bad for just a couple days, right? So that's why they're in those big grassy pastures, right? When it's all over, they're down there. All right, so we're gonna take a quick look at this and show you a way we can hopefully care about this character that we should be terrified of when we read all the books about. Brown bears and grizzly bears, for those of you who don't know, are biologically the same critter. They actually did some renaming on some of these because of hunters. Guys that were hunting bears within 75 miles of the coast were getting monster bears because they're maritime animals. They're eating everything in the ocean that comes up on the shore. They're eating dead whales. They're eating all kinds of critters. And so that bear would get much, much larger than an interior grizzly. And so for people who are trying to measure skulls and say this bear is bigger than that bear, well, yeah, every one on the coast was bigger than the ones on the interior. We've had bears down the peninsula from us that were killed that weighed 1,600 pounds. That's a rare polar bear that gets to that size. And so they're truly, that and the polar bear, are the largest land carnivores on Earth. And I've worked with them now for 33 years. There's nothing but respect for them. They're crazy smart. They do all kinds of goofy things. And we've had a lot of fun with them, but they're also fascinating to film. So let's take a little quick look at how we've now set this guy up.
We're looking at a bear's tracks on a mountainside in southwest Alaska. You might think that a brown bear's life is one of abject loneliness, but for the bear, perhaps it's stimulating loneliness.
You can still see those tracks way out there. Could you
Just
see them?
imagine waking up to scenes like this.
This is from a helicopter. It's rock solid. It doesn't.
7 months.
That's why that camera is so expensive. It does this without even thinking. There's no vibration at 60 miles an hour.
Early in spring, we
70
often see
miles.
these bears walking along the tidal flats. He's here to find a tiny candlefish. It's a cool little species, so oily it can be dried and literally lit on fire.
You guys have any fishes you can light on fire? That's pretty interesting.
In Alaska, there's certain areas where it's not uncommon to see bears and wolves together. Wolves that close to a bear are just a bit nervous. But he's there for the same reason the bear is. He's trying to dig up a candlefish for himself to help put out the fire in his belly.
That's not time-lapse. That's how fast the tide comes in there.
We have huge tides here in Alaska, sometimes 25 to 30 feet on a full moon. When the high tide pushes the bears off the beach, they can graze on these rich grass flats for hours. The bears here often stroll with this exaggerated swagger called cowboy walking. It's just another way to intimidate another bear that's trying to pick a fight.
Y'all remember high school, right? I got this.
A mother bear's work is never done, especially if you have 4 cubs. 4 cubs. Imagine trying to get them to all go in one direction at one time. Their playground is only limited by imagination. There really seems to be no limit here. And with this many playmates, the fun never ends. Even the run of the litter gets in a couple of good licks from time to time. They can play endlessly with a piece of driftwood or each other. It can go on for hours. Of course, it's always good to grab some mother's milk to get you fueled up for the rest of the day of play. Most summers, 250,000 salmon pass through this one stream. This is Brooks Falls, and it has become a monument to a collision of destinies. Just think about a salmon with thousands of miles of ocean and river travel under its belt. This is a world-class swimmer projected right into the middle of the best salmon killers in the animal world. And this mother brings her cubs into this squad of hungry bears. The search goes on. The mother hunts in the cold waters for hours. Even with all these thousands of salmon, the bears will still squabble over one fish.
See how fast that was? I love people who put bear spray in their pack, right? You got time, it's no problem. They're lightning.
After devouring 100,000 calories or so of raw salmon, a nap is really the only way to go.
That's as if they went back in there and took out that whole thing everybody ate a little while ago, 100,000 calories. They do that, 45 minutes, an hour and a half, 2 hours, something like that. I'm gonna run you just to the very end of this, and then so we'll have some time for questions, but what I wanted you to see was one other thing here that's really bizarre.
A bull moose in fall is one of the few animals that can intimidate a bear. We are just now finding out what native people likely knew for centuries, that moose migrate in the fall to winter quarters.
They don't do it everywhere, but in a lot of places they do.
So our bears enjoy the last warm rays of summer. Soon, they'll move up in the mountains for a long, well-deserved winter sleep.
Just one other thing before we go on to questions and all that, and thank you so much for coming out on a wonderful night. I'd be outside myself. I wouldn't come inside like this. I'm proud of you. Is that there's an old saying, say, if you want to go fast, go by yourself. If you want to go far, go with a team. I've got a group of people I work with that are staggering. My wife's one of them, but we have a little group of folks that have been together for years. We call it the A-Team, and they're all, one guy is probably 67. He can go up a tree, 150 foot. He just did one with Filipino eagles. Took 2 weeks just to find one, found it, built the thing, 6 weeks up in the trees, and he got it. He got the whole thing. There's only a few left, and he got them, one hatching an egg and everything else. So there are groups of people out here that are really working to make this happen. It doesn't happen by accident. So when you watch a show, stop and really give it a moment if you can, and turn off the phone and just go sit down and go, how in the world did they do that? And there's a lot of work goes into it, a lot of thought into it, and now we know how to do it. You're going to get establishing shots, wide, medium shots. We're going to go to great locations, and we're going to get a great storyline and a great character. And that's all there is to it, right? Folks, thank you so much this evening. All right, can I have some questions? Yes, sir. He's going to bring it to you.
This is a great show, but I recently saw, is this working? A program about robotic animals now that they're using. Are you involved in any of that stuff?
Let me see here. Now that you bring that up, you catch okay? What in the world is that? Throw that back up to me and I'll give it to him. Thank you, sir. That's a rock, right? No, you can put a GoPro in it, a little motor, drive up to something, and the camera can't even see what it is. You see it out in the pasture and you go, there's a rock, and there's a deer feeding there, and you only watch the deer. But I have a little camera in there, and you can do robotics in all kinds of ways. The greatest new one was I don't know how much they spent on that crocodile, but they have a little baby crocodile that was picked up by its mother, and it was a fake crocodile, and had a camera in it, and you get to see it from the point of view of inside the mouth of the crocodile. And so a lot of these now, what they're doing is relaying Blu-ray or they're Bluetoothing stuff, a signal back to another camera that's actually recording it. So they're not losing the camera when it gets crunched or whatever happens. So yes, we have been doing everything. Drones have been around for 20 years in different formats, a lot different than they are now. They're much easier for everybody to access, but we've been using a lot of those things for a long time.
Have you seen the baby hippo one?
I have not seen that one, no. Is that right? Oh my gosh. I mean, how much, to me, as long as the storyline's there, that's okay. But if it gets just to be a bunch of gizmos, what are we learning here? That we can emulate wildlife, but are we learning anything about it? So sounds interesting. I'd love to see it. And you do get a point of view sometimes. Like on the alligator stuff, years ago, you probably saw There's a guy named Kent Vliet, bald head, sitting in the water, swimming out with alligators. And you go, holy cow. It was back in the 80s we saw it probably the first time. It was Okefenokee Swamp. It was a show. Very famous show. The guy's name's Kent Vliet. He's swimming along with alligators at eye level. Well, I know it's nutcases doing this, you know. And I was in the water with him, pushing them off one time. And behind him, they were coming in behind him. So Kent, what in the world? So he's saying, well, all the behavior happens at water level. When they get ready to strike, they're going to blow up, raise up, and strike. So if that fake hippo helps us understand how they're going to work, then I'm all for it. Yes. Yes, sir. Right, one's right there.
Thanks, mate. How much time do you spend with, in your editing, matching a change of scene to the beat of the music?
Yeah, it can go either way, just so you know, and you already know this probably. But there's a few editors and camera people here that have been involved with this. You can use what they call a temp track, or you can put a track in first of music, and then edit to the music, and you can make it work that way. The other way is to actually write the music to the film, which we feel like's the best. But we have trickery involved because nowadays they don't give you enough time. I did some of the early shark shows for Discovery. We would spend a month on the music, and it was rock. And we would go in and have guys playing string or whatever instruments we wanted to use. Now, 10 days to do an album's worth of music, basically. It's written, it matches picture perfectly, and it's out the door for an hour. That's a lot of music to write. And so what we do is we have found that Richard, who's already left, good, we can talk about him now, will walk in 4/4. Our requiem sharks, the great whites, might move in 3/4. So I'll write a whole series, and my buddy will write a whole series of short rhythms and short melodic lines that match 3/4, 4/4, 2/4, cut 4, all these different timings. And guess what? They'll lock onto picture a lot easier, and then we can build off of them once we see what they're going to do and accent them. So those are the two ways that we would do that. Yes, sir?
This is the last question.
Okay. He had you up first, so sorry, guy. Catch me later, though.
Me?
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Hopefully I can ask two questions and I'll let you choose.
Okay.
From a perspective of an individual that doesn't have the maybe finance of a major corporation, PVC, the first part is stabilization. What do you find someone could use for stabilization, such as hardware, software, or equipment, like the drones or RC aircraft? And then the second part would be maybe something more colorful. You've brought up audio several times. Everything from the Japanese music to you're creating your own custom music.
Right.
Trying to find a cost-effective music was something you brought up early in
Yes,
the beginning. What would someone maybe go after if they're trying to style a video to the best music and present it to that audience?
Okay, well, let's start with the first part of your question one more time. Say that
Well, the
very
first
so
part
clear.
was basically image stabilization.
Right, yeah, okay. As far as the stabilization question, it's gotten way better, if I put it in horse terms. What you're finding is that the Karma, the little GoPro item they just came out with, great little item. You can walk along and be the deer in the forest, act like, that's called a POV shot, obviously, and you're acting like the point of view of that animal, and you can walk this thing through, and it's a gimbal, and it just adjusts. There are Move Eyes, and there's expensive ones, the Rokinons, and all those are really expensive. For us, what we do day in and day out is rent or lease. Don't buy. It's going to change in 2 months, and you're getting stuck with something. Just rent or lease. If you're trying to do this and make a living at it, if you're doing it, it's going to be a hobby, and you're going to use it for a long time. Buy it. Have fun with it. But if you're really going to be competitive, you're going to have to pick an item, use it, and then go on with that. The stabilization on the other end, Adobe Premiere is probably the easiest that I know of, and you probably know about warp stabilization. It's a real simple program that's inside that in one of their effects bins on the side there. And literally a film that is shot in the higher resolution, better and better that you can get. GoPros are now at 4K, that's not bad, and it will stabilize a shot. And what he's talking about is a shot that you shot with a long lens and it's kind of shaky, and you go, oh man, it's the shot's there, but it's just too, people are going to get seasick watching it. We're going to lose the front row. We can't do that. So you can put it into this item, and what it does is it clips it slightly. And it clips it so much that there's no more movement. And so warp stabilization is the easiest one I know of. There's a bunch of them, but that's one of them. You also might want to look at a company called Red Giant. It can take a 1080 shot and make it a 4K shot, and then you can stabilize it from there. Go the other way around. All right, and then the other part was music. And all the soundtracks. One of the things you can do is get relatively inexpensive mics like the Zoom 4K or 6K, those, stick them in the woods in the area that you're working, and that'll pick up sound. And And we use that sound back on them a lot. Oh, you get over here where the mic is. I can call in birds and do all kinds of stuff. And so what you're going to do in those cases is you can, if you have a bird, we had a bird in Alaska that go, that's his sound, that's what he does. He does it over and over and over again. But he's really cool because it announces spring and you wanted that shot. So we said, oh, that's cool. We had a movie camera at the time and an Aries back then was a $100,000 camera. So we had the bird come in and land on a stick with beautiful water splashing behind it. It was a natural setup. We didn't do anything setup-wise. All we did was call that bird, and there was no other place to land. He was so angry that we were in his territory talking to him. Right? When we got done, we stepped back a little bit, and we were talking about what we just did there and all that kind of stuff. He flew over, landed on the camera, lifted his tail, and left us a big signature. But as far as the birds out in the woods and all the other things, you get as much nat sound as you can. And you can actually write music or you can create music from GarageBand and other things by listening to what they do. A mockingbird I have ripped off so many times. They have maybe 50 to 100 calls in the matter of a minute or two. It's outrageous. They're the best jazz riffers there are. So you can steal music from the animal that you're describing. It's okay. There's no copyright there. Thank you, guys.
Still your microphone.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.